This week on Tuesday Noon, part one of our conversation with Steve Burt from Clarity Innovations. Is technology getting it done in the classroom? The largest high school graduation class since the baby boomers is on the way into the hallowed halls. Do our faculty have the technical tools and the skills to keep up with them? That's Tuesday Noon for June 6th, 2006. Welcome, everybody, to Tuesday Noon, our inaugural edition. My name is Pete Wright. I'm sitting around the corner here with
Mary Bradbury Jones.
Mary, what have you been up to?
Just getting ready for the summer.
Yeah?
Yeah.
You teaching a lot?
I am teaching a lot.
Yeah.
I've been doing quite a few online classes.
It hurts teaching online during this summer.
Oh, no.
No, teaching during the summer hurts any way you
look
at it. Yeah. I was a horrible summer student. And I'm even a worse summer instructor. I can't do it. I can't do it. You know?
Senioritis all year.
No, exactly. No.
And those are the dulcet tones of Mr. Jamie Whitley.
Hello. Thank you.
Good?
Thank you.
Good.
I have been teaching, not as much as Mary though. I'm trying to take the summer off because it's time for a break.
Yeah.
Yep.
You look like you need a break.
I do. I know. Thanks.
You're welcome.
You look
lost
good
a
too.
lot of hair.
Yeah. I'm going bald. I'm teaching so much. I'm still prettier than you, though, Pete. So
That's right. The bar is low.
Yes,
The bar is low.
right.
And our esteemed guest, and I say esteemed because this guy, he's quite a podcaster. He has an audience already.
Wow.
So we file this under writing on the coattails.
Three extra people.
Three people downloaded it last month. But, woo,
That's right.
And it was my mom. You sound so good, son. We love you anyways.
No, we can't make fun of the guest. This is Steve Burt. Steve from Clarity Innovations. Steve, tell us about yourself.
Well, first of all, thanks very much for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here. I work as, I'll give you the official title, I'm the Manager of Content and Research for Clarity Innovations. We're an education technology company, and what we try to do is match emerging technologies, whether they're things like podcasting, weblogs, a lot of the Web 2.0 technologies with the needs of education and other organizations. So we do a lot of work in Portland and in the Northwest with schools. Typically for us, that's K through 12, although we do some higher ed work. And then we do a lot of work with corporations and organizations who have interests in education and want to disseminate that stuff out. As for me, I do spend a lot of time as it were, paying attention to the blogosphere, podcasting, and I think, more particularly looking at the latest technologies. That's sort of the research component of my job, and what kind of Web 2.0 technologies can and are having an impact on education. Because I think a lot of the tools out there, we were laughing before we started talking about MySpace, certainly aren't targeted at the education audience. I mean, so many of them are either targeted towards fun, think MySpace, YouTube, that kind of thing, or they're targeted towards the business world, like an Amazon or an eBay development. And what we try to do, or in particular what I try to do, is see if there are ways, applications, whether you modify them or use the existing ones that can be used in education.
How are you using MySpace in education? I only ask because it's blocked here. I mean, nobody can even get to it.
Well, I mean, I think in the case of something like a MySpace, or thinking about AOL's new personal sites, the so-called MySpace killer, the idea is to look at those, or look at something like YouTube as models for interaction. The point is, for at least at K-12, the vast majority of our teachers, making some pretty broad sweeping generalizations, are not familiar with the tools. They've heard of MySpace, probably because they've read it on a newspaper, and more than likely that was a print copy of the newspaper, not an online copy. Not that there's a point there, but I think there's a subtle point, perhaps. But these are great models. I mean, you talk to I was talking to a good friend of mine who teaches back in Rhode Island, and he teaches 5th and 6th graders. And he did a pretty informal, he didn't mean it as a scientific survey of kids who'd used MySpace or YouTube. And we're talking 5th and 6th graders, so 10 and 11-year-old. A third, 30 to 40% of them have their own MySpace account. Wow. 60, 70% regularly check MySpace. Of his, sampling, there were very, very few who hadn't heard of these technologies. So we're talking about tools that 9, 10, 11-year-olds can do much more than just getting an email to show up on a web page, a block of text. We're talking about music. We're talking about video. And when you start combining those with, though our audio audience can't see Pete's lovely new MacBook, but you start looking at the tools out there and how they've become easier to use, whether it's something like the iLife software from Mac. It's so easy to make audio recordings, edit them, add video. So while I'm not working with any teacher or group saying, you should have all of your students have their own MySpace page as part of their curriculum, what we do use or have built for many schools are protected. We start with the sort of personal weblog, where every student has their own blog, and I know you guys do a lot of that here at University of Phoenix, and then start adding the kind of parallel features, the social networking tools that they've come to expect from a tool like MySpace. So there isn't, I wouldn't argue that there's a one-to-one correlation.
But it's the same concept, right? I mean, it's really this idea of being able to provide rich content in some kind of fashion and network with other people in whatever your sphere of influence is, right? And you touch one friend, you touch another, you touch another. So then you're just producing content, pushing it out there, letting people interact with each other. And if you really think about what education is, higher education, particularly as we look at adults going back to school, a lot of it, it's not just the content. It's also meeting people and opening up doors and avenues and all those sorts of things. So it's the same type of thing.
Sure, we talk about it as network. We talk about it as networking, and you could go to the Harvard Business School and take courses at the graduate level on establishing and expanding your business network. And this is the same model.
Absolutely.
The other point I'd make about a tool like MySpace is from a content position. And I'm not talking about content in terms of we need to have administrators at various educational levels paying attention and monitoring in some sort of Alberto Gonzalez National Security Council kind of method. But if you want to know what's on the mind of your students, what interests them, what focuses them, what appeals to them, that's a great place. Those sites are great places to look.
Are administrators watching what people say? Not only because there's the positive side, right? So there's the side of what do my students think, what are they learning, what are they saying, all those sorts of things. But there's the potential for abuse as well. Mm-hmm. There was something in the news just the other day, right? I forget the name of that. What was that?
Well, there's been several, actually, where they've posted something on MySpace and the administration's found out about it.
Yeah, Wilsonville, here locally, their school district had a fairly significant incident happen earlier this year where during student body elections, various students on MySpace posted some really derogatory and discriminatory remarks against one of the candidates. And at that point, the school, I don't know if the school board or the administration, kind of stepped in because they were seeing that as, less of a free speech issue and more of a slander or libel issue. And I think that's probably the appropriate point at which they have to step in.
Well, a line has to be drawn somewhere.
But doesn't it also depend, though, if you're hosting it as a school? So if it's your technology, then the line is different than if it's out in MySpace, out in the middle of nowhere, and you have no real authority over it, right? It becomes tough.
Well, which is the real discussion we've been having, too. Even here, in talking about finding ways to allow our students and our alum to connect, it's the whole build it or buy it in terms of the technology infrastructure. Mm-hmm. If you open it up to a partnership, then all of a sudden you open yourself up to the risk of user-generated content that doesn't fit with with the message you're trying to get out there.
Right.
Everybody's facing it.
What I advocate when I, work with, say, high school teachers and do training and professional development for them is not necessarily that they go in and sign up for a MySpace account, but oftentimes I do recommend they do that. Not that they're going to start putting a lot of information, but they might put a little bit about themselves. I taught high school for about 8 years, and it's pretty typical for kids to want to know. Actually, they want to know far too much about your personal life. But you can put some stuff, and I use different sites. I myself use. You could learn a lot about me if you look at my Flickr site, which is an online photo sharing site. Because when I travel for work or for pleasure, I put pictures up so you can see. Pictures of me, say, vacation I took last fall or business trip I took in February.
But what's the value of that from an educational point of view? So you're that high school teacher or college instructor and you've got that set up. What's the value to the student? And is that something they're asking for? And what does it bring back to them?
I think that's a good point and somewhat of an open question. But my feeling when I talk to high school teachers is it puts you at a sort of level playing field, even if you might not be as technically adept as many of your students. It puts you within sort of one or two more circles within their sphere of what they're comfortable with or what they're used to. So if they see a request come on their MySpace to add you as a teacher, as one of their friends, they can choose to reject that. But what it's telling them, and I don't want to make this sound too heavy-handed, but what it's telling them is that there is a broader audience out there who's looking at the content, and some of those are people they know, they're close friends. Some of those are more acquaintances, and that could be teachers, instructors, other people within their, sort of broader sphere. And then there's the whole kind of world, the big circle, which is the unknown internet out there. And this, to me, here I'll try actually to answer your question. Here's the educational import of that, and that's trying to get students, whether it's at the elementary level or at the college level, to understand what I think often gets fundamentally lost in the ease of use of these tools, and that is your content is out there. It becomes part of, whether you want to call it public record or public domain, and it's more or less permanent. Far too often I talk to students or teachers and say, show them a site like the Internet Archive and the Wayback Machine, and you can see websites going back to, 94, 95. There's this history, and if you Google someone's name, you're going to find content. And the more adept you are at searching, the more content you can pull out about what a student wrote. So, although it's a little bit, crying wolf, I think there are some real issues there about internet literacy to teach students, and that is when you go on your blog, and if you put information on there if you go really extreme and talk about an example of, these kids in Wilsonville who wrote a lot of hate speech, that content's there. It's been spidered or, archived by all kinds of search engines. And prospective employers 5 years down the road, as, we all assume these funny sort of Moore's law curves about how much more searching and more content. Presumably, some of those kids are going to end up applying for a job with somebody Absolutely. Who does a kind of search record on them, and they're going to see, and, if someone takes the time to go through the kind of content that someone has owned.
Well, the news is full of stories like that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, pictures on the web, or photos or things that you've written, and they get fired or you don't get a job because of it or whatever.
I just this morning sat into a session with Ron Bates, who is the nicest guy in the world. Plug for Ron Bates. He's just a really great guy. And he's a former physicist and mechanical engineer, and now he is an unbelievable networker. I mean, he knows everybody. I mean, you could look at those sites like LinkedIn. He is the top networker on LinkedIn. I mean, millions and millions of people know this guy. And so he is a retained executive search guy right now, and he did a study and said 63% of recruiters and hiring managers will Google you before they agree to an interview.
Wow.
63%.
Put your name in and see what pops back.
Yeah.
Wow.
Very interesting.
I think that's really interesting. I mean, first of all, it may not be you that they find.
Sure.
I mean, maybe it's anybody else. But what if they do find the, it's the 15-year-old, the pics that you thought were cute that were on your Flickr account, and now suddenly they're not so cute.
Sure.
Right.
I mean,
for me, you never look cute in your Speedos. So let's just set the record straight.
I always regret that tattoo.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Mary, one of the questions I have for you is, because I know you spend a lot of time training new faculty, probably more so than any of the rest of us. So as you're going through that process, what are you finding in terms of the acceptance of technology? And not only the acceptance of it, but again, part of my concern is that it's all cool and we don't know exactly what we're going to use it for yet and how it impacts. So kind of tell me about, what are people looking at, and what are they thinking, and what do you see? Or maybe there's not an acceptance. I don't know.
I would say that across the board there is an acceptance. Particularly, the training program that we do is we put them through a program that mimics a blended curriculum class. So they have face-to-face instruction along with online instruction. And so I think, for one, that experience is what helps them get to acceptance. One of the first thing that instructors will say is, wow, there's a social element out here that I never thought would be there. And that, I think, was one of their first roadblocks to thinking about online learning, was you're going to lose the social network. And so that's a big surprise for them. I think that the second thing that they see or they experience is how rich the discussions can go, depending on how deep the class wants to go, which direction they'd like to go, and how you can have multiple great conversations happening at the same time. And because of our environment, where we do it in an asynchronous environment, so we're not live time, I can come back and go back through threads later if I'd like to pick up some of those nuggets or to glean that knowledge that maybe I didn't have time to. So I think that the experience, first of all, really opens them to it. But it's not always just the training. Many times it's not until the instructor's actual first class where they're in charge, they're facilitating it, and they're leading it, where they really feel the benefits of it. So, for example, I know that one of the things we were talking about earlier in one of the articles when we were mentioning them was, are instructors, is it fear of the technology? Are they afraid that they can't have the type of learning that they're used to from the traditional classroom environment? One of the candidates that we had recently, longtime educational expert, PhD, was very resistant to the idea, but I think was at least open to it. And quite frankly, I think was hoping that he'd go through it and we'd say, well, you're fine to teach on ground. And then he'd just continue down that path. Well, he went through the training, and towards the end of the training, he was already starting to change some of his paradigms, but it wasn't until his first class we forced him to do one of our FlexNet classes with the blended curriculum. And about halfway through, he stopped me when he saw me at a meeting and was like, I love it. Oh my gosh, I never fathomed it could be this way. The type of discussions, the level of discussions, to get to experience the ahas of every student, I think, is very motivating and empowering for instructors.
That's why you teach.
Exactly. And if that's why you're teaching, then you get into that environment and it's almost addictive and energizing. And the instructors love to see the learning happen, force more peer learning. Let the peers learn from each other first before the instructor ever steps in, those kinds of things. So I think in general you have more of an acceptance. Now, 7 years ago would have been a whole different story.
And then where does it go?
Well, and also as a sort of corollary to that, I think now we have more acceptance, but we have more acceptance for new teachers. I mean,
yes, exactly. They're brand new.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about before the propagation of these online high schools, which begs so many issues that I want to talk about at some point. But it's this issue of, wow, we're with the high school environment where we were with online education 20 years ago, which says, here's a big Florida virtual or online high school. Is that what we called it?
Florida Virtual School District.
Florida Virtual School District with, increasing numbers of students, whether that they are enculturated with online learning through they're already homeschooled or they're planning on going to a university online, whatever it is. Their faculty, their training techniques, their teaching techniques are going to have to change.
I think in a way, and Mary, you were getting at this point, and it's one that I try to make pretty often when dealing with educators as well, is the issue of collaboration. For so long, when I came up in the world of teaching, which is not too long ago, the early 90s, we talked so much in teacher school about, how you do collaborative or group learning, and so much of it is so very forced. And, I knew it, my students knew it. I think most of us as educators know, when you force a group of, 4 disparate people to work together and you assign one of them the note taker and you're going to be the facilitator, because we don't call people leaders anymore. You end up with this kind of forced group where they've been kind of given tasks that they're not at all organic. There isn't any real genuine collaboration going on. And to me, what these tools allow, and it starts with blogging and threaded discussions to allow, more people to participate in more collaboration. And then I think branches off from there. For me, when I start demonstrating tools that I think cause teachers the most, you see the most light bulbs pop on in their heads are looking at tools like Writely. I don't know if you're all familiar with this one, but it's online word processing, but it can be collaborative, meaning you can have multiple people editing the same document simultaneously. And so at that point, you're talking about working on a document, having people editing it. It can be something as simply as, a group taking notes together, and then you've got the sort of shared power of 20 note takers as opposed to just one. To a lot of other tools. I mean, the latest, I think this is a pretty nifty tool. Some of us have probably used Visio if you want to do flowcharts or spreadsheets,
sure.
Or if you're in the classroom at K-12, you use Inspiration. That's kind of the piece of software marketed at K-12. There's a great online tool called Gliffy, Gliffy, and it's Writely for spreadsheets, flowcharts, and planning, meaning you get a little online graph, off a browser, and multiple people can log in, and you can be, dropping in your decision diamonds and blocks.
Well, that's more like the real world, right? I mean, that's how things are done at work. That's how you do things at home. I mean, the typical or traditional education model has been that teacher up front just passing you something, and then you take some kind of test to say, yes, I got it. Yeah. And the most times you just kind of memorized it and forgot it and those sorts of things.
Well,
so this
and
moves
in that, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. Well, this just moves us to the real world, which is we don't do that in day-to-day business and operation in our lives. It is more of a collaborative effort and learning from each other and teaching each other. And so then faculty become that facilitator of helping you do that versus just imparting X, Y, Z and having you return it. But
exactly.
Yeah.
Well, where I was going to jump in is in that model of the traditional, and I stand at the front of the room and I spew knowledge into your brain, and you hopefully retain that knowledge till you take the test and you walk out the door and 90%'s gone.
Yeah.
One that has to do with the level of learning that it's being taught to, but the other one is that's really only geared towards the auditory learner, unless the instructor's using a great deal of visuals up there as well as they're lecturing. So you've got, two major learning styles at a disadvantage already based on the structure of the traditional environment. Over time, we've all been there. I'm a hands-on learner. I struggled in the educational system. I learned how to adapt and function within what it was. It wasn't until later in my life that I discovered that actually, it wasn't about you and your intellect ability. It was actually how you were being taught. But the whole time going through starting to think, well, I'm not smart enough as these other people. I'm not capable like these other people. When I was just at a disadvantage, I had to work harder based on how I was being taught.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I think by bringing in technologies, you have the ability to hit multiple learning styles in multiple different ways so that the student connects.
This has been Tuesday Noon for June 6, 2006. For more information on some of the stories we've talked about today, check out our profile on Delicious, del.icio.us/Tuesday Noon. Please send us an email about just about anything to tuesday12@gmail.com, and we'll talk all about you on the air. Until next time, see you Tuesday Noon.